She mistook the black Maybach for her rideshare at 11:58 p.m. on Christmas Eve. The Korean Mafia boss locked the doors and whispered, "You're not leaving, Butterfly. Out there, you're a ghost. In here, you're mine." Lisa Howell got into the wrong car wearing a sequin dress she'd bought on sale and heels that had already murdered her feet. In exactly 2 minutes, bullets would shatter the reinforced glass above her head. In exactly 45 minutes, she'd be standing in the snow outside a Gothic fortress strung with Christmas lights, with no idea how she got there or why she couldn't leave. But she didn't know any of that yet. Before we dive into how one wrong car changed everything, make sure you're subscribed to Ruthless Romance Tales. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story where danger meets desire. Now, let's get back to the night Lisa's life became something she'd never imagined. Right now, she was standing outside a corporate gala on the edge of Midtown, watching her phone battery drop from 3% to nothing. The cold wrapped around her brown skin like a punishment, and the wind off the Hudson cut through her thin wrap like it had a personal grudge. "I hate Christmas," she muttered, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. It wasn't the carols or the decorations. It wasn't even the forced cheer. It was the way the whole world seemed to pair off this time of year, leaving people like her standing alone on frozen sidewalks, reminded of exactly how invisible they were. Another Christmas Eve proving what she already knew. Some people were meant to be found, and some people were meant to disappear into spreadsheets and empty apartments. The gala had been exactly what she'd expected. Champagne that tasted like regret, networking that felt like warfare, and that particular kind of loneliness that came from being surrounded by people who looked through you instead of at you. She'd slipped out the moment the CFO started his toast. Her phone screen blinked once, twice, then died completely. Black. A sleek black sedan glided to the curb, silent as a predator. Relief flooded through her frozen limbs. She didn't check the license plate, didn't verify the app. Her fingers were numb, her feet screamed in protest, and she just wanted to go home to her empty apartment and pretend this night never happened. Lisa grabbed the handle and threw herself into the back seat. "Thank God," she breathed, sinking into leather that smelled like expensive cologne and something metallic like copper. Like a storm about to break. "Brooklyn, please. Prospect Heights. The app should have the address. Can you crank the heat? I can't feel my toes." The driver didn't move. Lisa's rambling died in her throat. Through the rearview mirror, she caught eyes so cold they seemed to freeze the air between them. Sharp, calculating, framed by dark hair that fell across a face carved from stone and shadow. "Who are you?" His voice was low, melodic, laced with an accent that turned the simple question into an accusation. Lisa's stomach dropped. I'm the one who ordered the car. You're my rideshare, right? Black sedan. Pick up at. I am not your driver, Nabi." Her hand shot to the door handle. It wouldn't budge. Click. The electronic locks engaged with a sound like a coffin closing. Lisa's heart slammed against her ribs. "Unlock the door," she said, her voice trembling but firm. Right now, the man Lee Rang, though she didn't know his name yet, turned his head slightly. His jawline could cut glass. His expression suggested her presence was a complication he was deciding how to eliminate. "If you step out now, you die. Look behind us." Lisa turned. A gray SUV sat 50 yards back, headlights off, engine idling. The passenger window rolled down with mechanical precision. Streetlight caught the unmistakable glint of a rifle barrel. "Get down!" Lee Rang's voice exploded through the car. The world shattered into violence. The rear window spiderwebbed as bullets punched into the reinforced glass. Crack, 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 a rhythm of death. Lisa screamed, her body moving on instinct, flattening against the floorboards as Lee Rang's hand shot back and shoved her head down with brutal efficiency. The Maybach's engine roared. Tires shrieked against icy pavement. Lisa's cheek pressed into carpet that smelled like leather cleaner and gunpowder, her sequin dress riding up, glass raining down in glittering shards around her trembling body. More gunfire, more turns. Lee Rang spoke rapid Korean into a phone, his voice completely calm, as if being hunted through Manhattan streets was just another Tuesday night. "Let me out!" Lisa screamed. "Stop the car! I don't know who you are, but I'm not." "No." One word, flat, final. The chase went on forever. Sharp turns that threw her against the seat, bullets pinging off metal. The acrid smell of burnt rubber and fear sweat mixing with expensive cologne. When the car finally stopped, her ears were ringing, her hands were shaking, and her mind couldn't process what had just happened. Up. A hand closed around her arm, pulling her upright. Through the cracked window, Lisa saw it. A sprawling estate hidden behind high stone walls. A Gothic mansion wrapped in white Christmas lights that looked like stars trapped in iron. It should have been beautiful. Instead, it looked like a prison dressed for the holidays. Li Rang was already out, moving to her door. When he opened it, snowflakes drifted in, and his expression was stone. No fear, no concern, just cold calculation. Lisa pressed back against the seat, her voice shaking. "I'm not going anywhere with you." His hand closed around her elbow, not rough, but unbreakable, and he pulled her out into the snow. Her heels sank into white powder, and the cold bit through her dress like teeth. "Let go," she gasped, trying to yank free. "I said let go." He didn't look at her, just kept walking toward the mansion, dragging her with him. "Wrong car, Nabi. I know that now, so let me go, and those men saw your face." His voice was flat, emotionless, eyes fixed ahead. "Now you're coming with me." "I'm not." She dug her heels in, but he was stronger, and the snow made resistance pointless. "You walk out that gate, they grab you in 2 minutes." His jaw tightened. "They think you're my woman. They'll use you to get to me, or they'll kill you to send me a message." Her blood turned to ice in her veins. "Tell them I'm not. Tell them it was a mistake. Won't matter." Still walking, they saw. "That's enough. You can't just... Stop talking." The words cut like a blade through snow. "I have things to handle, and you're alive because I decided you should be. Don't test how long that decision lasts." The mansion's front door swung open. Warm light spilled out, and then, impossibly, a tiny woman in a red apron came rushing out, white hair flying, arms spread wide. "Ranga," she shouted in Korean accented English. "You are late. And who is this beautiful girl? She is freezing." Lisa stared. Li Rang stared. And somewhere in the disconnect between bullets and grandmothers, between mafia bosses and home-cooked meals, Lisa Howell realized her life had just split into two, the before and the after. The wrong car had found her, and it wasn't letting go. The estate rose from the snow like something out of a Gothic nightmare, all stone and iron and shadows dressed in Christmas lights. High walls topped with security cameras, gates that looked like they could stop a tank, and men in dark overcoats standing at intervals like pieces on a chessboard. Lisa's heels sank into pristine snow as Li Rang pulled her toward the entrance, his hand still locked around her elbow, burning through the cold like a brand. Inside, the warmth hit her like a slap. Marble floors reflected golden light from chandeliers that dripped crystal like frozen tears. Her reflection stared back at her from polished surfaces, a black girl in a torn sequined dress, mascara smudged beneath wild eyes, looking like she'd survived a war she didn't know she'd enlisted in. Li Rang released her, but the absence of his touch felt like its own kind of captivity. He moved through the grand foyer with the ease of a king in his castle, shrugging off his blood-spattered coat and handing it to a silent man who appeared from nowhere. His white shirt was pristine beneath, tailored to every hard line of his body, and Lisa hated that she noticed. "This way?" Not a request. He led her up a sweeping staircase, down a hallway lined with art that whispered old money and older violence. The room he opened looked like something from a luxury magazine, a 4-poster bed draped in silk that caught the light like water, sheets so white they seemed to glow, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the frozen Hudson River. The view was breathtaking. The bars on the windows were subtle, but they were there. Lisa turned to face him, her arms wrapped around herself. The torn dress exposed too much skin, and his gaze tracked every inch of her, the curve of her collarbone, the rise and fall of her chest, the way her dark skin gleamed in the lamplight. Not leering, assessing, like she was a problem he was trying to solve. "My phone," she said, holding out her hand. "I need to call someone. Let them know I'm dead." He pulled her phone from his pocket, the cracked screen catching the light. As far as the world knows, Lisa Howell got into a car on Christmas Eve and disappeared. That's the story that keeps you breathing. You can't just... I can. He stepped closer, and the room felt smaller. His presence filled spaces she didn't know existed. "You're a ghost now, Lisa. For your own sake, stay dead." He placed the phone on the dresser, then walked to the door, paused. "There are clothes in the closet. Bathroom through there. Don't try the windows." The door closed with a soft click. Not a slam. Somehow that was worse. Lisa stood frozen for 3 heartbeats, then moved. She tried the door handle locked from the outside. Of course, she went to the windows, pressed her palms against glass so thick it barely registered the cold outside. The view was stunning, snow-covered ground stretching to the river, lights twinkling in the distance like false promises of freedom. She pushed. The window didn't budge. reinforced, unbreakable. She sank onto the bed, silk sheets cool against her overheated skin, and the truth settled over her like a shroud. Li Rang had said he was protecting her, but protection required consent. This was possession. She wasn't a guest in his fortress. She was a treasure he'd locked in a vault, and the fact that the cage was gilded didn't make it any less of a prison. Her reflection stared back from the darkened window, a ghost wearing her face. And for the first time since getting into that car, Lisa wondered if the woman she'd been was already dead. Lisa couldn't sleep. The silk sheets felt like accusations against her skin, too soft for a woman who'd spent the night running from bullets. She'd found clothes in the closet, cashmere and designer labels that fit her curves like they'd been waiting for her body and changed out of the ruined dress. But the black sweater and tailored pants felt like a costume for a role she hadn't auditioned for. The smell found her around midnight. Ginger and garlic, sesame oil, and something sweet beneath it all, drifting through the hallways like a siren's call. Her stomach growled, reminding her she hadn't eaten since the gala's sad canapes. She followed the scent through the silent mansion, past guards who watched but didn't stop her, down a back staircase into a kitchen that looked like it belonged in a different house entirely. Warm, lived in, human, the woman at the stove was tiny, white hair pulled into a bun, wearing a red apron over traditional Korean dress. She turned, and her face lit up like Lisa was the answer to a prayer she'd been whispering for years. "Ah, you are awake!" She rushed forward, grabbed Lisa's hands. Her grip was surprisingly strong, warm against Lisa's cold fingers. "You must be starving. That foolish boy. He brings you here and doesn't even feed you. Sit, sit." I don't think I should be." Lisa glanced toward the door, expecting guards, expecting Li Rang, expecting consequences. Nonsense. The woman Halmione, Lisa would learn, pushed her onto a stool at the granite island. "You are a guest. My grandson forgets his manners when he is playing gangster. Here, chop these." A cutting board appeared, vegetables, a knife. And Lisa, who'd spent the evening being hunted, found herself chopping scallions while a Mafia boss's grandmother hummed old Korean folk songs and stirred a pot that smelled like comfort and home. "You have kind hands," Halmione said, watching Lisa work. "Careful hands. What do you do, child?" "I'm an accountant." The words came out before Lisa could stop them. "Forensic. I find money people try to hide." "Ah," Halmione smiled, knowing and sad. "Then you understand my Rang better than most. He is always counting costs, always calculating, never just living." Lisa's hands stilled. "He kidnapped me. He saved you." Halmione's voice was gentle but firm. "There is a difference, even if it doesn't feel like one yet. Now, tell me about your family. Where will they worry you are missing?" The question landed like a blade between ribs. "There's no one to worry." Lisa resumed chopping, faster now, needing something to do with her hands. "My parents died when I was 20. No siblings, no husband, no boyfriend waiting." She laughed, bitter and sharp. "I could disappear tomorrow, and it would take my office a week to notice I hadn't submitted my timesheets." Halmione's hand covered hers, stilling the knife. "Then you understand him even more. Loneliness recognizes loneliness, child, even across different prisons." Lisa's vision blurred. She blinked hard, refusing to cry in front of this stranger, who felt less like a stranger with every passing moment. Her gaze drifted across the granite island and snagged on something that made her forensic brain snap to attention, a leather ledger, left open, numbers bleeding across pages in neat columns. She shouldn't look, but her eyes were already scanning, parsing, calculating. The payouts were wrong. The amounts to an entity listed as white snakes, they followed a pattern that didn't match legitimate protection payments or even standard extortion. They were too regular, too precise, too much like... A sharp beep cut through the kitchen's warmth. Halmione's face changed, hardening into something that reminded Lisa exactly whose grandmother she was. A guard appeared in the doorway, speaking rapid Korean. One word cut through: drone. The danger wasn't over. It was circling overhead, watching, waiting, and Lisa realized with cold clarity that she wasn't just hiding in Li Rang's fortress. She was trapped in the center of a war. Lisa waited until 3 a.m, when even killers had to sleep. The ledger burned in her mind like a brand, those numbers refusing to add up, refusing to make sense in any legitimate way. She'd memorized the account codes, the transfer patterns, the signature timestamps that felt wrong in a way only a forensic accountant would notice. The study wasn't hard to find. Light leaked from beneath the door at the end of the east wing, and she moved toward it like a moth to flame, knowing she'd probably get burned. She didn't knock, pushed the door open, and found Lee Rang surrounded by monitors. His white shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, dark hair falling across his forehead. He looked up, those ice blue eyes catching her like a trap. "You should be sleeping," he said, voice rough with exhaustion. "Your books are bleeding." Lisa crossed to his desk, her bare feet silent on Persian rugs that probably had their own security detail. "The payments to the White Snakes. They're not protection money. They're payroll." His jaw tightened. "You went through my ledgers. Your grandmother left them on the kitchen counter." She leaned over his desk, her dark fingers pointing at screens that glowed like accusations. "These transfers? They're too clean, too regular. Someone inside your organization has been funding your enemies for months, maybe years." Lee Rang stood, and suddenly the massive desk felt like nothing between them. He moved around it, predatory and precise, until he was close enough that she could smell sandalwood and the faint copper scent of violence that seemed to follow him like a shadow. "Careful, Nabi," he whispered. "Accountants who ask too many questions in my world tend to disappear. Then I'm already dead." Lisa lifted her chin, meeting his gaze without flinching. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she refused to back down, "Because I found something else. A ghost account, offshore, Cayman Islands. The digital signature belongs to someone with full access to your family's financial infrastructure." She pulled a piece of paper from her pocket numbers she'd written in the kitchen, while Hermione hummed lullabies. Lee Rang took it, his fingers brushing hers, the contact electric and dangerous. His eyes scanned the figures, and she watched his face change. Watched the moment he understood. Jinho. The name came out like a curse, like a prayer, like a eulogy. "My uncle. It's worse." Lisa's voice softened despite herself. "I traced the account back. The first major transfer was 10 years ago. December. Right before the night my father was killed." Lee Rang's hand crumpled the paper, his knuckles white, tendons standing out like cords beneath skin. His other hand found the desk, gripping the edge hard enough that wood groaned in protest. "The hit on the Brooklyn Bridge. They said it was the Italians. A territory dispute. It was purchased." Lisa moved closer without thinking, drawn by the raw pain bleeding through his control. "Your uncle funded the assassination. He's been stealing from you ever since, using the White Snakes as cover. You're not fighting a rival gang, Lee Rang. You're fighting a coup. And your uncle is betting you'll die before you figure it out." The silence stretched between them like wire, taut and dangerous. When Lee Rang finally looked at her, something had shifted in his gaze. She wasn't a burden anymore. Wasn't a complication, or a hostage, or a ghost. She was a weapon. Sharp, unexpected, deadly. "Can you prove it?" His voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of kingdoms rising and falling. "Give me access to your servers." Lisa's dark eyes blazed. "And I'll burn his empire to ash." Lee Rang's hand shook just once, just barely, before he reached out and tucked a curl behind her ear. The gesture was tender and terrible, intimate and claiming. "Then let's start a fire, Butterfly." They worked until the numbers blurred into weapons, until Lisa's fingers ached from typing and her eyes burned from staring at screens. Lee Rang moved like a shadow behind her, bringing coffee that tasted like midnight and watching her dismantle his uncle's empire one transaction at a time. When she finally leaned back, the sky outside was still black, and exhaustion sat heavy on her shoulders like hands. "Drink." Lee Rang pressed a glass into her palm, amber liquid catching the firelight. The study had transformed while she worked. He'd lit the fireplace, and now flames danced against stone, throwing shadows across his face that made him look less like a killer and more like a man carrying the weight of kingdoms he never asked for. Lisa took a sip. The whiskey burned smooth and expensive, tasting like smoke and time. "Hibiki," she said, recognizing the flavor from corporate dinners where she'd been invisible in corners. 21 year. "You know whiskey." He settled into the leather chair across from her, close enough that their knees almost touched. The fire crackled between them, a living thing that breathed heat into the cold night. "I know a lot of things people don't see." She took another sip, letting the warmth spread through her chest. "That's the trick to being forgettable. You watch everything while everyone looks through you." Lee Rang was quiet for a long moment, his eyes tracing her face like he was memorizing it. Outside, the blizzard howled against windows, but inside, the fire made the world small and warm and dangerous. "I know that feeling," he said finally. "Everyone sees the boss, the killer, the heir to violence, No one sees the man who collects vintage jazz records and hates every bullet he's had to fire. Lisa's breath caught. You like jazz? Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Charlie Parker. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, vulnerable and real. My father used to play them on Sunday mornings, before everything became blood and territory and survival. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and the distance between them felt like nothing and everything. You understand that, don't you? Being invisible even when you're standing right in front of people? Yes. The word came out raw. At that gala tonight last night, whenever it was, I stood in a room full of people I'd worked with for years, and not one of them knew my name. I was just the accountant, the black girl who fixed their numbers and disappeared. She laughed, bitter and sharp. I used to think I was protecting myself by being invisible. Turned out I was just erasing myself one day at a time. Lee Rang reached across the space between them, his fingers finding her shoulder. A sequin from her ruined dress still clung to the cashmere sweater she wore, and he brushed it away, the touch so gentle it made her ache. His hand lingered, warm and solid against her skin, and Lisa felt the moment stretch like glass about to shatter. You're not invisible to me, he said, voice low and rough. I saw you the moment you got into my car. Saw you when you corrected my ledgers. Saw you when you chose to help me burn down the man who killed my father. His thumb traced the curve of her shoulder, and heat bloomed beneath the cashmere. You're the most visible thing in my world right now, Lisa. And it terrifies me. The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. The blizzard screamed outside, and Lisa looked at the man across from her killer, Air, broken boy, wrapped in expensive suits, and saw her own reflection staring back. Two ghosts who'd found each other in the dark. It terrifies me too, she whispered. His hand slid from her shoulder to her jaw, tilting her face toward the firelight. His eyes searched hers, asking questions neither of them had words for. The distance between them was nothing. Everything, a choice that couldn't be unmade. Neither of them moved, but neither of them looked away. The alarm shattered the moment like a bullet through glass. Lee Rang was on his feet before the second blare, his hand already reaching for the gun holstered beneath his jacket. The fire still crackled. The whiskey still glowed amber in forgotten glasses, but the world had shifted back into violence and survival. Stay here. He moved toward the door. All business, all boss. The vulnerable man from seconds ago locked away behind ice and training. What's happening? Lisa stood, her heart already racing, adrenaline flooding her system like muscle memory from a night she'd never forget. Side gate. They're inside. He spoke into his phone, rapid Korean cutting through the chaos of alarms and shouting from somewhere deep in the house. Then his eyes found hers, and something fierce blazed behind the calculation. Do not leave this room. Do you understand me? Lisa nodded, watched him disappear into the hallway, counted to 30, then grabbed her phone, the dead one he'd taken, now charging on his desk, and followed. She didn't know why, didn't know what insane instinct made her chase danger instead of hide from it. Maybe it was the accountant in her, the woman who'd spent her life following paper trails that led to truth. Maybe it was something darker, something that had woken up the moment Lee Rang's hand touched her jaw. Whatever it was, it pulled her through the mansion, past guards running toward the breach, toward the winter garden at the back of the estate. The glass conservatory glowed under security lights, tropical plants incongruous against the snow-covered grounds beyond. Lisa pushed through the door, and cold air hit her like a fist. The side gate hung open, twisted metal smoking in the snow. Men in dark tactical gear moved through the gardens like shadows, and at the center Lee Rang, fighting 3 of them at once. He moved like violence had a grace, each strike precise and brutal, but there were too many. One raised a gun, the barrel catching moonlight, and Lisa's throat closed around a scream that wouldn't come. She didn't think, just ran. The gunshot cracked through the night. Lisa felt the impact before she heard it, not pain, but pressure. As Lee Rang's body slammed into hers, taking her down into snow that burned cold against her skin. His weight covered her completely, one hand cradling her head, the other still gripping his gun as he fired over her shoulder. Stupid, he growled against her ear, breath hot and ragged. So goddamn stupid, Lisa. More gunfire, more shouting, then silence that felt worse than the chaos. Lee Rang's men had arrived, securing the perimeter, dragging away bodies and survivors. But he didn't move, just stayed there, covering her, his heartbeat thundering against her back like war drums. I told you, he said, finally pulling her up, his hands running over her body, checking for wounds. You don't leave this house without me. His white silk shirt was torn, blood seeping through the fabric, his or theirs. Lisa couldn't tell. You could have been killed. So could you. Her hands found the tear in his shirt, the warm slickness beneath. You're bleeding. I've had worse. But his hands were shaking as he lifted her, carrying her back toward the house like she weighed nothing, like she was something precious that needed protection. That was Jinho's final warning. He knows we're coming for him. Lisa's arms wrapped around his neck, holding on as he navigated through wreckage and snow. She should have been terrified, should have been planning escape. But pressed against his chest, feeling the steady drum of his heart beneath blood and silk, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Safe. Not because the danger was gone, but because someone was willing to bleed to keep it from touching her. In her Brooklyn apartment, she'd had locks and alarms and the illusion of security, but she'd been alone, always alone, in Lee Rang's arms, surrounded by violence and vengeance, and the promise of more blood to come. Lisa finally understood the difference between safety and being protected. One was a place, the other was a person. New Year's Eve arrived wrapped in false peace and falling snow. The mansion gleamed with preparations for war disguised as negotiation, every surface polished, every guard positioned like pieces on a chessboard. Lisa watched from the mezzanine, hidden behind ornate railings, her laptop balanced on her knees, fingers poised over keys that would trigger financial apocalypse. Below, in the grand hall, Lee Rang stood waiting. He dressed for execution, black suit, white shirt, no tie. The bandage on his shoulder from the garden fight was invisible beneath tailored wool, but Lisa knew it was there. She'd watched Hermione change the dressing that morning, had seen the way Lee Rang's jaw tightened against pain he refused to acknowledge. The doors opened. Uncle Jinho entered like a king arriving at his own coronation, flanked by men who wore loyalty like cheap cologne. He was older than Lee Rang, softer, with eyes that calculated profit in every glance. Behind him, the White Snake Enforcer's muscle bought with stolen money and promises Jinho would never keep. Nephew. Jinho's smile was all teeth and venom. I'm glad you've come to your senses. Surrender is always easier than... I'm not surrendering, Lee Rang said, voice flat and cold as winter. I'm offering you a choice. Walk away now, or watch everything you've built burn. Jinho laughed, the sound echoing through marble and crystal. You have nothing. The White Snakes control half your territory. Your accounts are frozen. Your allies are dead or scattered. You're a king with no kingdom, boy. Lisa's fingers moved. The first sequence executed silently, invisible as poison in wine. On her screen, numbers began to cascade, accounts emptying, transfers reversing, a decade of theft unraveling in real time. She'd spent 3 days building this virus, this logic bomb that would detonate across every financial institution Jinho had touched. You're right, Lee Rang said. I had nothing. Until I found someone who could see what I couldn't. He looked up, directly at the mezzanine, directly at Lisa. Someone who taught me that the best weapons aren't bullets, they're spreadsheets. Jinho's smile faltered. His phone buzzed. Then again. Then continuously, a swarm of notifications that turned his face from smug to confused to horrified in the space of heartbeats. What did you do? He grabbed his phone, scrolling frantically. What the hell did you... I found an accountant. Lee Rang said, moving closer. Predatory and precise. A forensic accountant who traced every dollar you stole, every payment you made to the White Snakes, every piece of evidence you thought you'd buried. She didn't just find it, Uncle. She weaponized it. Lisa hit the final key. The logic bomb's last payload deployed Jinho's encrypted communications, rerouted in real time to FBI servers. Every order for violence, every bribe, every murder he'd commissioned, delivered gift-wrapped to federal prosecutors who'd been hunting the White Snakes for years. Jinho's phone died in his hand. The lights in the hall flickered once Lisa's signature, her way of saying the job was done. Around them, the White Snake Enforcers' phones began to ring, then went silent. Their accounts were gone, their protection was evaporated. They were already ghosts. You shouldn't have left a trail, Lee Rang said, his voice soft and terrible. And you definitely shouldn't have left it where an accountant could find it. The doors burst open. Not Lee Rang's men. Federal agents moving with the efficiency of a trap sprung perfectly. Jinho didn't run, just stood there, watching his empire dissolve like snow in fire, understanding too late that he'd been outplayed by the one person he'd never factored into his calculations, a woman he'd never bothered to see. Lee Rang looked up at the mezzanine again. Their eyes met across distance and violence and the ruins of his uncle's treachery. He didn't smile, but something in his gaze shifted acknowledgement, gratitude, possession, The debt of blood was paid. The war was over. And Lisa Howell, the invisible accountant from Brooklyn, had just brought a criminal empire to its knees without firing a single shot. The Maybach idled outside her Brooklyn apartment building like a ghost returning to haunt its past life. Snow fell in lazy spirals, the same way it had on Christmas Eve. Was it only a week ago? It felt like a lifetime. Like Lisa had died in that moment she got into the wrong car and been reborn as someone she didn't recognize. Someone visible, someone essential, someone dangerous. Leav sat behind the wheel, hands resting on the leather, silent in a way that felt heavier than words. The cut on his jaw had healed to a thin line, a souvenir from the garden breach. His white shirt was pristine tonight. No blood, no violence, just expensive fabric stretched across shoulders that carried kingdoms. But his eyes, those ice-blue eyes that had terrified her, once held something she'd never seen before. Uncertainty. This is it, he said finally, his voice rough like he'd swallowed broken glass. Your building, 4th floor, corner apartment, the one with plants in the window that are probably dead by now. Lisa stared up at the dark windows. Her apartment, her life. The place where she'd spent years disappearing into numbers and loneliness, where every surface was clean and every corner was empty and no one ever knocked on the door unless they had the wrong address. Safe, solitary, suffocating. Leav reached into his jacket and pulled out a black leather envelope. He placed it on the seat between them like evidence in a trial. Open it. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the flap. Inside a passport with her photo but a different name. Claire Martin. French citizenship. And beneath it, a key attached to a card with a Paris address in the 8th arrondissement, the kind of neighborhood where embassies lived and old money breathed. There's a penthouse waiting, Leav said, still not looking at her. Fully furnished, bank account already established. No ties to me, no ties to any of this. You can disappear, Lisa, be a ghost again. But this time you choose where you haunt. Lisa's throat closed. This was freedom, real freedom, a life without bullets and bloodshed, without federal investigations and enemies who saw her face and marked her for death. Everything she should want, everything that made sense. She looked at the envelope, then at him. And you? I stay here, clean up the mess, rebuild what Jinho destroyed. His hands tightened on the steering wheel, leather creaking under pressure. I release you from this, Lisa, from me. You were never supposed to be part of this world. You deserve... Don't. She cut him off, her voice sharp as the knife she'd used to cut vegetables in Halmioni's kitchen a lifetime ago. Don't tell me what I deserve. I've spent 30 years listening to people tell me what I should want, where I should be, how small I should make myself to fit into their comfortable boxes. She looked back at her apartment building, saw the dark windows, the empty rooms, the life she'd built that felt more like a tomb than a home. When she'd lived there, she'd been invisible. Safe from being hurt because she'd been safe from being seen. But safety without connection wasn't living. It was just surviving, and Lisa was tired of surviving. I was a ghost long before I got into your car, she said, turning to face him fully. Her dark eyes caught the streetlight, blazing with something fierce and certain. Every day, I erased myself a little more, made myself smaller, quieter, less. I thought I was protecting myself, but I was just dying slowly enough that no one noticed. She picked up the envelope. For a moment, Leav's expression cracked pain and resignation bleeding through his control. Then Lisa handed it back to him. I'm tired of being a ghost, Leav. I'd rather be a queen. The silence stretched between them like a wire pulled taut, humming with potential energy. Then Lisa reached across the console and pressed the lock button herself. The heavy click echoed through the car, the same sound that had trapped her a week ago, now the sound of her choosing to stay. Take me home, she said. Leav's hand covered hers on the console, warm and solid and real. His thumb traced the line of her palm, the gesture intimate and claiming and asking permission all at once. You understand what you're choosing? This life doesn't have safe exits. Once you're in, I'm already in. Lisa turned her hand, lacing her fingers through his. I stopped being a bystander the moment I found Jinho's accounts, the moment I decided to burn his empire down, the moment I realized I'd rather stand beside you in the fire than hide alone in the cold. Something broke in Leav's expression, the last wall crumbling, revealing the man beneath the boss. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressed a kiss to her knuckles that felt like a vow, like a brand, like a promise written in blood and choice. Then welcome home, butterfly. The Maybach pulled away from the curb, leaving the dark apartment building behind. Lisa didn't look back. In the window's reflection, She saw herself clearly for the first time in years, no longer invisible, no longer erased, no longer a ghost haunting the margins of her own life. She was Lisa Howell, forensic accountant, queen of a criminal empire, the woman who'd gotten into the wrong car on Christmas Eve and found the only right thing that had ever happened to her. The snow kept falling, the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and white. And somewhere between Brooklyn and Westchester, between the life she'd left and the life she'd chosen, Lisa finally felt like she was exactly where she belonged. If you loved Lisa and Lee Rang's story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Ruthless Romance Tales for more dark romance stories where love is dangerous, desire is forbidden, and happy endings are earned in fire and blood. Drop a comment below telling me what you thought of Lisa's choice. Would you have stayed or left? And if you want more Mafia romance, check out the playlist linked in the description. Until next time, remember, sometimes the wrong choice leads you exactly where you need to be.